The first Israeli hostages are being released. Many Palestinian prisoners are also being released. It's the first phase of an Israeli ceasefire that's supposed to begin today. Joining me is General Amir Avivi, and welcome. Thank you for joining me today. He's head of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, and definitely the man to go to on this very difficult opportunity and day. Thank you.
My pleasure. Please.
This is not a simple ceasefire by any means. It's been a tough negotiation. The first phase of the ceasefire is a deal between Israel and Hamas, and it's an exchange deal, as I said, that's going to take place over 6 weeks, with hostages being given over in dribs and drabs. Many Palestinian prisoners are going to be released. Is this a good deal or not?
Well, first I want to say that this morning there is good news. The IDF with the Shin Bet managed to bring back Oron Shaul, a soldier that was killed in 2014 in Operation Protective Edge in the area of Sajaiya. Since then, his body has been held by Hamas, and today in operation, the IDF and the Shin Bet managed to bring him back. And this is before Hamas gives us any names of the first 3 hostages that are supposed to be released. So we're waiting to see. At the moment, nothing is happening, and the IDF is getting ready to attack again in Gaza. So we'll have to see how this goes. I think that when we look at the deal, we have to look at the big picture. And the big picture is that we are in a war where we have to reach 3 goals of war, and all of them need to be reached. We need to eradicate Hamas as a military and governmental entity. We need to bring back all the hostages, and we need to create the terms in Gaza that never again there will be a terror army in Gaza. We have prioritized for a long time destroying Hamas as a military entity. We have dismantled most of Hamas military capabilities. We have been negotiating for a long time a release of the hostages, and now, mainly because we managed to win against Hezbollah, the change of regime in Syria, the weakness of Iran, and also the threats of President Trump that there will be hell if they don't bring back the hostages. This created the opportunity and the terms to bring back many of our hostages who are alive, and I think that this is good news. It's Israel's responsibility to bring back the hostages. It's the right moral thing to do, but it's also a goal of war, which needs to be reached, one of 3 goals. And so in this context, I think that the deal is good. It has many downsides. We're releasing terrible terrorists, as the Gazans are going to go back to the north of Gaza. There are many challenges, but we have to balance between the different goals of war, and this is what leadership is about, taking difficult decisions, but constantly moving towards reaching the goals of war.
Shouldn't there be some kind of fairness in negotiation when you're looking at the numbers of hostages being released to the number of prisoners being released?
Yeah, on the average, we released around 30 terrorists for each hostage. Obviously, we would have liked to have a better deal and much less terrorists, but this is what they managed to achieve. I think that the biggest issue for Israel was not agreeing to stop the war. Hamas wants only one thing, wants to stop the war and survive. This is something Israel is not going to agree to. Hamas needs to be eradicated. And as long as Israel keeps the goal of war of eradicating Hamas and moves towards this goal of war, there are things that we can give up, even if it's difficult, as long as we keep our goals. We have to remember that we apprehended 1,000 terrorists in 1 month in Gaza. We can reverse this. It's not going to be easy, but it definitely can be done.
You have told the media line before 40% of the tunnels remain intact. At least 40% of the infrastructure of Gaza remains intact. So how does that work in tandem with what you just stated, that Israel has really, in a sense, won the war, got into much of the infrastructure. Can you explain that?
Well, we killed tens of thousands of terrorists, injured many, toppled most of Hamas leadership. We closed Gaza in a way that they cannot rebuild themselves, they cannot smuggle anything outside of Gaza. Hamas is sustaining itself only with one thing, the humanitarian aid it's getting. And we need to work out this issue. And with the new administration, make sure that we use this tool to bring down Hamas. We have to really detach between Hamas and the Gazans, make sure Hamas cannot seize humanitarian aid and then get money and then control the people through the humanitarian aid. This is achievable. It hasn't been done in the last 6 months, but now there is an opportunity looking into the future to change this and really be able to bring down Hamas. What's keeping it alive is mostly the humanitarian aid.
Are you confident that the border with Egypt is sealed, that smuggling is not continuing from the Egyptian side?
Yes, I'm pretty confident, and I can say that in this deal, not only we didn't leave Philadelphia, we even reinforced the forces. There are 3 times more forces now in Philadelphia than there was a week ago. So we are really making sure we're closing this border. We are controlling also the perimeter inside Gaza, around a kilometer throughout the Gaza Strip that Israel is controlling to defend the towns. So Hamas can do a build-up of certain kind during this month and a half, but it's not exponential. They cannot bring new munitions and operatives from outside Gaza.
We've heard that Hamas is recruiting some of the local citizens to join Hamas. They are rebuilding. How concerned are you about this, and to what capacity have they built up again?
It's definitely a concern. Hamas has recruited thousands of Gazans in the last few months. It recruits them by paying them a very small amount of money, 100 shekels, 150 shekels a month, but also by threatening them that if they don't join Hamas, their families won't get food. And this is exactly why we need to really cut Hamas from the humanitarian aid and direct it only to the society, which needs a complete different way of handling the humanitarian issue. Hamas is definitely getting more people on board, but these are 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. It's not the warriors it had before. Hamas is far, far away from the strengths he had before the 7th of October. And Israel has attacked fiercely in the last few weeks and is continuing to degrade Hamas all the time. And they will go back to degrading Hamas as soon as we finish this hostage deal.
There have been discussions in the past about Marwan Barghouti being released. He's someone that many of the Palestinians have eyed as a leader for the future. Do you believe he'll be in that mix of those released?
Well, it's not going to be released now, and I hope never. I think it will be a grave mistake from Israel's side to release somebody like him to rebuild again leadership of terror in Gaza and in the Judah and Samaria. There are some people that shouldn't be released at all.
General Avivi, Israel's just weakened Hezbollah, and there's a shift of power with both the president and the prime minister. As a matter of fact, the prime minister just stated they wanted to see Israel withdraw Lebanon by January 26. Do you believe that Hezbollah is going to be taking a back seat in the Lebanese political dynamics or not?
Israel is not looking at the 60 days. Israel is looking at the implementation of the agreement and the ability of the Lebanese army to dismantle Hezbollah positions in South Lebanon, to push Hezbollah out of South Lebanon, and to also enforce all over Lebanon the need not to let Hezbollah rebuild itself. At the moment, Israel is keeping full freedom of operation to attack anywhere where Israel sees that Hezbollah is trying to rebuild itself. In the ceasefire, Israel targeted more than 45 Hezbollah terrorists and infrastructure. When we saw that the Lebanese army are not doing what they're supposed to do, so I think that the deployment of the IDF might be much longer and will dependent on what will happen in Lebanon. I think there needs to be a big pressure from the administration, from Europe, from the moderate Sunni states on Lebanon to dismantle Hezbollah according to Resolution 1559, together with all other militias, and really build a sovereign, normal state that might be a partner in the future if we manage to detach Lebanon from the Shia axis.
There are many more tunnels. We've talked about this before that are still existing in Lebanon. How can you turn a blind eye on this fact?
Israel has dismantled completely everything along its border, 2 miles at least inside Lebanon, in a way that there cannot be a terror infrastructure near the Israeli border. Israel might push towards having a dead zone, an area where people won't be able to come back as long as this resolution is not implemented. Everything along this perimeter has been completely leveled down and destroyed, including the tunnels. There is infrastructure inside Lebanon, but Israel is making sure that Hezbollah cannot rebuild itself. Lebanon now looks like Syria in the way the IDF is operating, full freedom of operation everywhere. In a way, Lebanon is landlocked. Hezbollah cannot rebuild itself through the ground because Syria is in control of Sunni forces and not Shia. Israel is monitoring also the airspace and sea. And we need to keep this. We cannot let Hezbollah rebuild itself, just as we cannot let Hamas rebuild itself again. Israel cannot have terror armies on its borders anywhere. Not in Gaza, not in Lebanon, not in Syria, and not in Judea and Samaria.
Well, speaking of that, Al-Jawlani and the, Tahrir Shams, the Hayat Tahrir al-Shams, his group, are demanding that Israel withdraw from where they're holding in Quneitra and the areas in Syria, similar to what you had just discussed. Do you see a point that Israel can move out, that there'll be this opportunity to just get out of Syria, get out of Lebanon, and move forward?
I don't see this happening in any near future. Israel is going to hold this position throughout the coming year and maybe even much more. And it's early to assess what will happen in Syria in the long term, whether they'll function as a country or not, whether they'll go back to civil war. It's completely unclear. And also the intentions are unclear. I mean, Jawlani, he comes from Al-Qaeda, Jabhat Nusra. He's a very radical guy, and his appoints in the government are also very radical people. So they cannot be trusted, and we cannot let them rebuild a military force because this will endanger Israel at a certain point. So Israel is opening eyes and really monitoring what's going on in Syria and keeping our forces in a perimeter that can defend our towns.
The Kurds have been protecting the prisons which house many of the ISIS fighters. Has Israel also, in this case, been monitoring what's happening there? What can Israel do about it?
Israel cannot do at the moment much about what's going on inside Syria, apart of making sure they don't get any major capabilities. So if we'll see a buildup of capabilities, we'll attack that, probably. But we have to monitor the dynamics inside Syria and see what happens.
The Houthis have sent a message that Israel should not attack them as the ceasefire is going down between Israel and Hamas. What's your response?
Just yesterday, they shot Israel and they should be attacked fiercely. And I think that part of the discussions with the administration is how to deal with the head of the snake, with Iran. We need to attack the nuclear sites. We need to attack the military capabilities of Iran. And we also need to attack the Houthis. And this needs to be done with a coalition. It's time that the US takes leadership and shows the might and strength of the US and builds global deterrence. This is not just about the Middle East. This is about the US really being a world leader and deterring also the Chinese from invading Taiwan or the Russians from further aggression in Europe. And this requires a show of strength. And this needs to be done by attacking the nuclear sites of Iran.
President Trump is faced with quite a large problem when it comes to the Middle East this year. At the same time, he's looking towards expanding the Abraham Accords. How do you feel that both the scenario of wiping out some of the really bad actors and at the same time advancing those goals for the Abraham Accords can work in tandem?
These goals are completely dependent on each other and connected. President Trump talked about peace through strength, which means you need to bring down the Shia axis and strengthen the moderate Sunni axis together with the Western world and Israel, building a Western Israeli Sunni alliance that will stand strong not only against this Chinese, Russian, Iranian front that has emerged, but also against the Sunni radicals who are now getting stronger after the withdrawal from Afghanistan, after the takeover of Syria. And this threatens Jordan. This threatens also stability in Egypt. The only way to stabilize the situation is building an alliance, a Western Israeli moderate Sunni alliance.
As a general who has led wars, large-scale wars, and also runs a security organization, if you had to advise President Trump right now, what would be the first two things he should do in the first 100 days?
So, as I said, we need to launch a military attack on the nuclear sites of Iran and the Houthis. We need to advance this peace agreements, normalization with Saudi Arabia and the moderate Sunni world. And concerning Gaza, when President Trump said there will be hell if they don't release all the hostages, we need to translate this to actions because they're not going to release all the hostages without hell on their doorsteps. And we need to understand what hell means. And I think that Israel needs to work out a clear plan with the US. What will happen if they don't release all the hostages? What will happen if they don't even release all the hostages in stage one? And what will happen definitely if they don't release the hostages after this first stage that was agreed upon? And I expect to see a completely different approach that will really put real pressure on Hamas, on Qatar, on Egypt to bring back all the hostages and to have Hamas surrender, lay down their weapons, and leave the Gaza Strip.
Tanks are aligning the border from the Egyptian side since the beginning of the war. Why is that?
Egyptians did reinforce the border with Gaza at the beginning of the war with tanks. Since then, there hasn't been major changes in the amount of forces on the Egyptian side. Israel is coordinating with Egypt the activities along the Philadelphia corridor, and Israel in the last few days reinforced the Israeli forces along the Philadelphia corridor to make sure that Gaza is completely closed and there is no smuggling of weapons or terrorists into Gaza from the Sinai Peninsula. This is the situation at the moment on the Egyptian border.
The attacks within Israel have increased. There's grave concern as to what's happening in what people call the West Bank. The question I have for you relates to the Palestinian Authority and the fact that they have gone in and they've been cleaning house. Is Israel involved in the security situation tied to the Palestinian Authority today? Is there cooperation? And do you feel that this is going to do the job?
The Palestinian Authority is acting mostly because of self-preservation, but their activities in Jenin and in other cities have failed. They withdrew. Israel is not counting on the Palestinian Authority to defend its citizens. And the IDF, as we speak, is reinforcing the area of Judea and Samaria with more battalions to be able to defend the Israeli towns and also do the activities to apprehend the terrorists. We know that this area might deteriorate, but I would say that overall, looking at the big picture from the 7th of October, the Central Command of Israel, who is in charge for the Jordan Valley security and also the mountains of Judea and Samaria, overall is doing a good job, has kept this area pretty stabilized. Yes, there were some terror attacks that emanated from there, but overall, the command enabled Israel to focus more on Gaza, on Lebanon, Syria, and is keeping this area under control.
Is there cooperation between Israel and the Palestinian Authority today?
There is a cooperation, but it's most tactical level. The Palestinian Authority is not a factor when it comes to Israel's security. It mainly deals with everyday life inside the Palestinian cities, and their level of control is very low. They are challenged by Hamas, by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and fractions of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The Palestinian people are fed up with this entity. It's conceived to be very corrupt. It pays billions to terrorists. It incites in schools. It's the very swamp that creates all the mosquitoes in the form of terrorists that we are dealing with in the last 30 years.
Hamas has been using social media channels to locate Israeli soldiers when they are visiting ICC nations. They are trying to have them arrested, working in tandem with the nation as well as with the ICC. It's a very serious issue. What measures can the Israeli Defense Forces impose?
This is a global campaign we need to really fight. It's not only Hamas doing that, it's mostly the authority that is leading the delegitimation of Israel and its leaders and its soldiers. And we have to be very active and proactive in really fighting this phenomena.
General Amir Avivi, thank you so much for taking the time here at the Media Line, and hopes that the hostages will be released week by week and out. Thank you.
Thank you very much.